guys, it's day 4 of VBS. I hope you've been having a terrifically good time. I know I love VBS. I'll be doing it at my house while you're doing it at your house. It'll be lots of fun. So today, our last day of VBS, we're talking about the idea that God can use your special gifts to serve him and spread the gospel. And sometimes we think like, oh, I got to be like a preacher. And certainly God can use pastors, but that's really not what this is about. God has given you special talents, and he can use whatever they are. So today, instead of looking at one missionary or 2 missionaries, we're going to look really quickly at 6 or 7 who all had really different gifts. Before we do that, though, I want you to think about in your house and think about what special talents people in your house have and that are able to help each other. Like, I'll tell you about my house, okay? I have my husband, me, my son Alex, and my daughter Caroline. Alex is really, really mechanical. So when anything is broken in our house, my husband and I don't fix it. Alex fixes it. He's able to figure out how things work. And we are so thankful to have him in our family because we're not like that. Caroline is an unbelievable problem solver, and she's super passionate about animals. So if anybody's animal is hurt, you're going to go to Caroline and she's going to help you. Or if you have a problem, you're going to tell it to her and she's going to help you solve it. My husband, Ryan, is the best researcher in the world. If you have something going on and you need to know the facts behind it so you can figure out what to do, you're going to go to him. I'm a pretty good organizer, so if you need something planned out, I'm your girl. Each of us has a different talent, and God can use us to do our own thing. If you came to me and were like, Miss Becky, could you please repair my broken object? I would laugh, and it would never happen. I would pass you off to Alex. And so whatever your skills are, God can use you. And these people are great examples of that. We're going to talk first about somebody from right here in Birmingham. And her name was Barbara Barker. And Barbara Barker grew up and she started training as a dancer. I don't know if any of you are athletes, but if you are, a lot of times you do start as a kid. And she was an amazing dancer, as in she was a professional in New York by the time she was 12 years old. Like, she was a really, really spectacularly good dancer. And she had a really funny, spectacular life in New York. Like, she dated movie stars and, performed in big shows. But she kind of eventually realized that wasn't the life she wanted for herself. And so she came back to Birmingham and she married a guy who's a pastor. And they were kind of doing life together. But as she thought about it, she realized that she had this really serious passion for dance. God had given her this really substantial gift in dance. And also, she just enjoyed it. You may have something you just have fun doing. Like, I love to swim. I will swim at the drop of a hat. You could probably put like a puddle in my backyard and I'd go swim in it. And for her, that was dance. And so she came up with this idea that they should start a ballet school at their church. And that seemed great. Some, girls and boys could come and swim, or come and dance. But a kind of cool thing happened. God used those dancers to be missionaries. Do you know that there are some parts of the world where U.S. missionaries just are not welcome? Countries like China and Russia and Cuba. But do you know what are welcome? Dancers. And so those dancers from the Briarwood Ballet have been able to go in countries and share the gospel through dance in ways that no preacher would have been allowed to do. And so it's kind of cool to think that Barbara Barker, who was dating movie stars, became so much more. She took her passion for dance and used it to serve God instead of just serving herself, which I thought was kind of cool. Person number 2 is a guy named George Mueller. Now, are any of you kind of a little compulsive about details? Like, you want your desk really straight and organized? You don't just like throw your change or your money out on the table. You have it in a system. George Mueller was an accountant. And let me tell you, baby, his things marched in a nice straight line. He liked order and structure. And thankfully for a lot of kids, he decided to take his planning and financial and structure skills and apply them to orphans. Back when he lived, a lot of times orphans, if you did not have parents, you would be put to work like in a factory or a mill. You might not have a home. You might literally have to live in the streets. In his lifetime, George Mueller provided a home for 10,024 orphans. 10,000. In fact, at first, he and his wife would just bring them into their house. And then at some point, they had so many, their neighbors were like, for the love, get some property. And so they built another building because their neighbors, there were like hundreds of kids there at their place. And it got a little outlandish. So they built an orphanage. And he was so good with the details. This was somebody running an orphanage, right? He was not a rich man. But he was so good with the details that he would just pray to God for what they needed. And God would provide, and they made it work. And they even had things like, back then, if you were a poor kid like that, you might be lucky to have one set of clothes. But in his orphanage, every kid had multiple sets of nice, neat clothing. He provided them such a good education that the mills and stuff in the area where they used to take those kids who were like out in the street nearly went out of business because they had no workers, because these kids were getting an education and could go on to have successful lives. So George Mueller used his talent for such extremely exciting things as accounting and paperwork to serve God and save thousands of kids' lives. Isn't that cool? Person number 3, or actually this one's more of an organization. Do you guys know about the NBA, the basketball league? Do you know that even people in the NBA are missionaries? One of our family friends are missionaries in Spain, and they have a camp where they do sports camps for kids. And do you know that the Phoenix Suns would send people over for years, every summer? Now, if those kids are like you guys, wouldn't you be excited if an NBA basketball player came and taught you to play basketball? So were the kids of Spain. They loved it. And they were willing to listen to the gospel from these basketball players in a way they might not have been willing to from a preacher. Person number 4 is named Eric Liddell. Eric Liddell's gift that God gave him was running. He was fast, like winning the Olympics fast. And he had a very famous story that happened where he was going to go to the Olympics. He felt very clearly like he should not run on Sundays. He thought that was something that God wanted from him, was to have a day of rest on Sunday. And so he gave up running in the race he was most likely to win. But I'll tell you something really cool. He won another race. He ended up winning multiple medals. And God used his passion for running, but also his passion for God, for thousands of people to hear his story. They made a movie about it. And when he was finished, he didn't go back home and just get in a Wheaties box. He went to China and was a missionary. And he was taken as a prisoner of war in a Japanese prisoner of war camp during World War II. And he decided, instead of just like being really sad that he was in miserable conditions, which he was, he decided he was going to teach all the kids who were in the camp science. And he did. And sadly, he died in the camp. He had a brain tumor and the conditions were really bad, and he died. But interestingly, those kids went on to be amazing scientists, which I think is really pretty cool. Person number 5 is Gladys Aylward. She was a woman. They said she was too dumb to be a missionary. She was short and she wanted to be tall. She had black hair and she wanted blonde hair. She thought she was kind of a loser. They literally told her, "You are too dumb to learn a language. You cannot be a missionary." But she went to China, and you know what? The people in China weren't really tall, and they had dark hair, and she fit right in. And you're going to be amazed to know she managed to learn the language. Isn't it funny how God can use you? And she even did hilarious things. She was short. Like when I say short, I mean like really short, like in the 4 feet range, 4 feet 11. And she broke up a prison riot with giant men. She was really cool. We've talked about her at VBS in the past. Person number 6 is Amy Carmichael. Amy Carmichael was living in India, and a little girl ran to her asking for help. She had been, she was in a temple. The little girl was not a temple to our God, but like a fake God. And they were going to do terrible things to her. And this little girl was very scared, and she ran away. And Amy Carmichael saved her life. And she not only saved her life, she saved thousands and thousands of other, or hundreds and hundreds of other kids' lives. Person number 7 is Helen Roseveare. Helen Roseveare is a doctor. Do any of you love science and think you might like to be a doctor someday? God can use that talent too. And Helen Roseveare built 2 hospitals in the Congo. She had a lot of crazy things happen to her, like she was captured by rebels, and they did really terrible things to her. But even after that happened, she went back to the country after they'd had a civil war and helped rebuild it and make it special. Guys, as you listen to these people's very brief versions of their stories, we have a dancer. We have an accountant, somebody who likes paperwork. Ooh, fun. We have a basketball player. We have somebody who loves science and who's a runner in the Olympics. We have a person who is just like short and they said she was too dumb. We have Amy Carmichael, who was a missionary and helped save children's lives. And we have Helen Roseveare, who was a doctor. You know what, guys? No matter what gift you have, God can use you to do something spectacular for him. And I would encourage you to think about, sometimes we don't want to brag, like we're like too humble, but God has given you special gifts. I would encourage you to think for a minute, what is it that makes you especially unique? And whatever it is that makes you special, I promise you, God can use that to make the world a better place and to spread his gospel. I hope that you will think a little bit today about God's plan for you and the special gifts and talents he's given you. And if you can't think of any, if you're like, I'm bad, think about somebody like Gladys Aylward, who they told was too dumb, too short, too dark-haired. She might not have been able to tell you at that point in her life what was special about her either, but she figured it out when she got older, and God used her powerfully. So even if you can't come up with something today, kind of think about it as time goes on, and those very things that you're passionate about or you're good at is how God's going to use you. Have a great rest of your last day of VBS. You're awesome. We miss seeing you in person, but I know you're having so much fun at home.